There is a Solution for That is sponsored by VARC Solutions. VARC Solutions helps small businesses succeed by delivering expert QuickBooks bookkeeping, consulting, quick-base development, and integrated solutions. If you own a small to medium-sized business that uses QuickBooks or QuickBase, the experts at VARC Solutions can help. In business since 1999, with people who care and the knowledge and experience to solve your toughest problems. Visit VARCsolutions.com for all your QuickBooks needs. Welcome back to another edition of There's a Solution for That, where we help small businesses succeed by discussing challenging business problems and best-in-class solutions. All right, welcome everybody to the next episode of There is a Solution for That. We have another great podcast for you today. We're going to be interviewing and talking with Anna Stallman of ASC Communications. And I'm going to throw it over to her to kind of do her own intro, but we're going to be talking about the problem of corporate communications and how Anna is solving that. So Anna, kind of tell the audience a little bit about you and your company.
Sure. Well, Brad, thanks for having me today. This is super exciting, and nothing I love more than talking about communications, especially with business leaders. So my name is Anna Stallman. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, originally from Chicago, made my way to Washington, D.C., and about 7 years ago, made Charlotte, North Carolina home. ASC, formerly called, or currently, but formally called Anna Stallman Communications, is that full service strategic communications shop. What we really specialize is building businesses, but with a communications toolbox. So as a full service but boutique agency, we combine public relations, digital marketing, and creative design into a cohesive package so that companies can come to us and get a really deeply integrated story and all the tools to help tell their story as well. So we're about 3.5 years old, a team of 12, but we have lots of great partners across the country in 1099 relationships, so we can be that full service communications firm while leveraging a more boutique model.
That's awesome. Well, 12 people, 3 years, that's growth, right? That's fast. And I'm sure you've gone through a lot of those emotional stages, growing it from one person to a really solid team. So that's amazing. That's fantastic. I'm sure there's going to be lots of topics we could talk about, like just how do you grow a business too. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of delve into is, I get emails probably 20 a day from folks that are saying, I can improve your website. I can help you with your digital marketing. And so digital marketing obviously is a buzzword that everybody's jumping on. But what I thought was unique about you when I first heard about what you guys are doing is corporate communications is not, to me, it doesn't sound the same thing as digital marketing. So can you expand a little bit more on like how that's different in your eyes compared to just digital marketing or advertising and that type of role?
That is a great question. So oftentimes we also get these inbound inquiries from potential clients that say, hey, can you rebuild our website? Or I need social media help, or design a new logo for me. And my first question always is, why and what's your business goals? Because let's say a business owner, they might be in the accounting business and they have been told that websites are really important and they might need a new website. But I'm looking at their current website and it's perhaps functioning well. Or I'm asking them a question of, well, where do you get most of your leads from? Corporate communications, how I look at it, it really starts at understanding the business opportunity and sometimes problems, sometimes challenges, but first addressing that business opportunity and then putting the toolbox, the communications programs in place. So corporate communications is really working at that business owner level. Most of our clients are that C-suite level as well. We understand what their business opportunities are, and then we work with them on defining their narrative, their goals, and then we tell them, hey, this is what you should do. But if you start with like the tools, and it's like, okay, I need a website, oh, maybe social media, you're really just putting a bunch of Band-Aids on. And then all those tools, sure, they might be performing well individually, but they're not embracing that whole corporate communications narrative that helps all of those individual tools build on each other, work harmoniously together to get that business closer to their ultimate goals. And what I love, sometimes we tell a client that's like, I want a new website or I want a new logo. We say, that's a waste of your money. Don't do that. Consider this instead. So I think that might be the main difference with corporate comms. It's really much more connected to those business goals than versus digital marketing goals, which is impressions and lead gen and things like that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that too, because I mean you're really hitting a point that I think is really really good. Not just about the strategy. I mean, obviously that's the top level most important thing. But like you, I mean, we have partners all around the country, and every once in a while they'll call me up and say, "Hey, can you look at my website?" And we actually had a session just a few weeks ago with one of our partners, and we talked about our website, and she's like, I don't like it. I want to change it. And of course, I looked at it, and I'm like, well, there's a lot of things that I would do differently. But again, I was like, well, how do you get your clients? And she goes, well, I mean, mostly through, relationships and chamber and referrals. And I said, so not from your website, right? She's like,
Yeah.
no, not really. I was like, okay, so you just want to have one. But I was like, oh, do you even know how many people are visiting your website? You're in a small town.
Yeah.
Most of your networking is in your small town. It's like, how much traffic do you have to your website? So, and if the answer is zero, yeah, you can improve that thing all day long. It's not going to make a difference. So it sounds like one of the first things you could do is really help owners step back and think, is what you're thinking about doing even the right thing to do, not necessarily, yes, we can help.
A- Absolutely. And then we go a step further. So, is it the right message? So, oftentimes companies are, when you're working so hard on the inside, you see it in a different perspective than your customer does. And that's where we also come in and we help really look holistically at this business. So you might know what tools you should be using, but are you saying the right message? Are you actually getting into what we call your white space? And that's something I'm really proud of that we do really well. Every company out there, I believe, can exist in its own white space. And when you have your white space defined, you don't have competitors. So you wake up in the morning, you're not like, how am I better than XYZ company? Instead, you're just solely focused on being the best you can be in your own category, your own defined perspective. And then you're selling to your strengths, and then you're selling those strengths directly to the defined audience. So you really create your own micro market, and you're so laser focused on that this competitive, like, well, they're doing that. Do I need to do that? Kind of becomes irrelevant because you're doing exactly what you need to be doing for your business. And so we come in and kind of help right size that message and really help our clients get laser focused on their business and not looking at their competitors.
I really, really like that. Yeah, because I mean, I was even actually just talking with my wife just the other day about, she's like, well, who are our competitors? I'm like, well, it's hard to say I mean, there's a lot of folks that do QuickBooks and bookkeeping and different things like that we do, but it's not like they're comparison shopping necessarily, right?
Yeah,
So we're not necessarily competing, in the true sense of the word. So yeah, it's a interesting thing. I want to follow up on one of the points that you made, and that's you mentioned white space, and it sounds like that's kind of related to the story. Like what's the narrative that they're trying
yeah,
to tell. So maybe tell me just a little bit more about that part of what you do.
sure. So when our ideal client comes to us kind of really eager to open up the books and not in your business where you look at their financials, but we're looking at their audience acquisition, we're looking at surveys from employees and customers, we're kind of looking at all these data points. And why we're that's pretty much what we do first is like, let us get deep into your business, but because before we start making recommendations on this should be your narrative, this should be your focus, we got to kind of really invest into your business and understand what's working well, what could be improved on, and just understanding the business. So we really call that like the visibility analysis, where we come in and dig deep, and then we also conduct this external audit where we are looking at your competitors. So we're analyzing perhaps what they're doing well, strengths that we're seeing, how you stack up to them, and then we're looking at data points like surveys, feedback, reviews. All of that's helping us understand kind of where you play in the market. And then we're doing these CEO interviews or, preferred clients, you might have your premier client that you have a great relationship with, interviewing them as well. And so we match like this quantitative data analysis of the ecosystem with exactly what we're hearing from your leadership of what you're doing, what you're selling, what your strengths are. We help develop this content strategy. And that's really where the white space emerges because we don't want to operate in a silo where we're not looking at those external factors, but we want to understand them so we can hone in on what makes you so unique so that you can elevate yourself to that white space. And in that white space, we're doing things like creating, taglines and really core messaging pillars of here's the core messages that we're always going to be selling to. And it might be something about unique services, your people, your knowledge. We'll be drafting all of that together. We put together that content strategy, and that is truly intended to live across the entire organization. So yes, it comes out in a written format with like a pretty brand book and visuals and really kind of helps people understand that core message that can help you live in that white space. But we realize that if it's just on paper, then it's just on paper. So
Right.
that next phase is then when we help activate it across your organization so that that narrative is helping every part of your business speak to that white space. And so that's, I think, pretty unique to what we do is understand that quantitative analysis of what's your
Yeah.
marketplace, who are you playing in, draft that narrative, and then take that narrative off of paper and put it to work so that everyone is equipped with the tools to tell that white space story.
I think that's incredible. And actually, I'm gonna reinforce what you just said too, because I think a lot of the folks that I talk to or get emails from, right, that are in the digital marketing quote unquote space, it's all about that external communication. It has in very little, if not anything, to do with your culture, your internal teams, and the stories that you're telling yourselves, about what we're about and what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so. Sounds like you guys dig into the details as well from a corporate people perspective, maybe a little bit as well.
Absolutely. And I know we talked a lot about corporate communications here. Marketing is extremely important. You need marketing to grow your business, sell products, sell services. But your number one brand ambassador are the people working for your company. And one of my favorite exercises when I'm, onboarding a new client or maybe even pitching a new client to really drive in this point, imagine I walk into a room with a prospective new client. You have five leaders there. Who are you? And I ask all of them the same question. Tell me in a sentence what your company does, or write it down. Then we're going to have everyone go around and say it. 9 out of 10 times, everyone is so vastly different describing what they do or what the company does. And that's a problem because we want to start building that brand loyalty and brand recognition. And if your own internal employees don't even know how to succinctly talk about your business,
Right.
then we can come in and create that narrative so it's very repeatable. And of course, people can say it in their own language, but it has to essentially be the same thing that, and if your internal employees aren't doing it, there's no way your external audiences are doing it either.
Right, right. Or to the I think the other point you made, which was if you're messaging out to the world, you're all about something, and then they call into the office and they're like, "Oh no, we don't do that," or whatever, right? If there's not congruence between those two, yeah, it that would create a disconnect and probably a lack of trust, and then probably not a client. So fantastic. So tell me more about this. Like when I like when I hear you talk, right, and you're talking about not just working through the marketing, but the story and the narrative and the brand and the internal stuff. My knee-jerk reaction might be that's really just for big companies, right?
Um,
So help dispel that myth. It's like when do you feel it's maybe most appropriate for somebody to reach out to a company like yours to start helping with this stuff? Is it day one? Is it year one? Is it year 10? Tell me a little bit more about that.
that's a great question. We have clients at every life cycle because companies also evolve. And we have to realize that the company you launched started maybe 5, 10 years ago evolves because of the market, your customer, you figured out your strengths, you changed products. Like there's pivots that happen along the business. And I think any single company can benefit from really defining their story. Right now, we have a client that is getting prepared to launch a company next year. And he hired us to help define his logo and his name and some simple branding. We advise him to keep it small. Like, let's do kind of a small brand launch product for you, because doing a full service brand storytelling before you launch is difficult because you don't get that feedback from the audience yet. You're kind of guessing how the market will respond. But it's important to understand, his story. And so when he launches, he has a succinct message that can resonate and be sticky. Alternatively, yes, a big company might need this because maybe they've grown so fast that they've lost sight of who they really are, and they've added a bunch of products and the story doesn't make sense. I do think for when a company is just getting started, the number one most important thing is to find your audience and understand who your audience is. And that often requires some basic marketing of creating like a simple website, creating some simple social media channels, start getting your messaging out there. I would actually prioritize that ahead of doing a big brand development, because you have to first start reaching that audience and defining who is resonating. Once you have that opportunity to get some feedback and know who you're speaking to, I think that's the most helpful time to do some brand story building. But if you have the opportunity to start from day one or day -1, I think that's great, 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 great. It just may not be a reality for some businesses pre-revenue.
Right. Yeah. Pre-revenue being the key, right? It's like,
Yeah.
things cost money, right? You need to have some money to be able to afford expertise and really, top quality people to help out with stuff. Unless you're using your mom and your brother and your sister, right?
You
Which a
need,
lot of companies do. A
yeah,
lot of startups, they use their family and that's okay, right? But not necessarily as good as, if you hire people that have been doing high quality work for 10 years, or 20 years. So,
the
um,
reality is you do need an audience to speak to. Otherwise, you're kind
yeah,
of just like I would really appreciate a beautiful logo, fancy website, corporate messaging, video, but if there's no one to receive that, then you're probably a little premature of investing in that. So I would say at least have an audience, know who you're selling to, and then start investing in some brand building.
well, let me ask you some a little bit more detail on like the audience section. So like how would you, and I know it varies, right? But because there's no one answer to this question, but how do you typically break an audience down? I mean, is it geographic? Is it gender? Or is it, I mean, is it all the above? Or, how do you typically try to start framing that or helping a company frame who their audience is?
Right. Well, you think of it as stakeholders. So any single company has a handful of stakeholders. I typically think about it as this way. And we do this, we actually sometimes put names for them, because then when you're internally talking about your audience, it's like, oh, that's Sally. Sally likes coffee in the morning, reading her newspaper in the evening. She shops at so and so. Like, this is Sally. That's a Sally audience. So when we're defining these persona audiences, they end up breaking into current customers, prospective customers, um, influencers, so people who could help influence someone's purchasing decision, and then kind of like third-party ambassadors that would help extend your message. And then the fifth one is usually friends and family, because they are great. They're the people who are going to repost, like your things, show up at events no matter what. So
Right.
you're really thinking about like those 5 audiences. And understanding who's buying your product, who's buying your service is perfect for like the now in the moment. Those perspective is really where I think you have a lot more analysis, like what's motivating that person? How do I kind of convert them? Similar to like a nonprofit, I believe that before you make an ask or a sales pitch, you have to have like 3 soft touches. So you don't always want to be selling to a prospective customer. You have to understand other ways to soft touch them, get in front of them without like a buy me like type of a message, because you want to build that brand awareness. And that's probably where you're thinking a little bit more like your questions of like, how do we break it down? So those prospective customers is probably thinking like, what What social media channels do they use? What digital channels do they use? Are they a newsletter person who's constantly reading newsletters? Are they much more social where they're getting their information from social media channels? Or are they a good paper person? You need to mail them something. And that's where we really dig deep into how they're consuming information and what's their preferred method of information consumption. And that's not necessarily like a geographic or gender age discussion. It's much, much more nuanced. And that's
Yeah.
where it gets fun and a little tricky.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, like one of like I bang many decades ago when I was in college, like one of my favorite subjects was marketing, right? And although that's not my day job, right? That's not my career. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm always just fascinated about marketing and how do you connect with people and so yeah, I imagine if that was a daily a part of it was if that was a career, I can imagine how you'd wake up in the morning just you're excited because you're like helping crack the code of like how people think and why and make decisions. So, um,
It's my brain. Like when I open my inbox, I'm not really looking at information. I'm like, oh, that's interesting how they hooked me there. Maybe
right,
I'm buying it, but like with that marketer brain, if anyone's taken like a marketing course or a psychology course, like the psychology of commerce is so interesting of like what gets a person to click. And what gets a person to open that email or what gets a person to unsubscribe. The unsubscribe stuff is so fascinating. Like what gets someone so motivated to take 5, 10 seconds out of their life to completely unsubscribe from an email? Like let's understand that more.
well, as an aside, you talk about the inbox. One of my I mean, I get again probably 100 sales emails a day, and it is kind of annoying. But when they come in, I love these ones that are like, "This is my last email," and I'm like, "Thank God! I've been waiting for that. I've been waiting for you to say this is my last one." There's
Take
a
it.
reason I haven't responded. It's because I don't want to buy what you're having. Um, you know and then so I also like to kind of harp on like LinkedIn for a while. It's like some of these are it's so saturated now, right? I get somebody reaching out on LinkedIn and their title is lead generation expert, right, for accounting firms, and they're just connecting because they want to connect, that they want to connect with their network, right? And I'm just like, okay, connect, wait 5 seconds. Hey, Brad, would you like me to help you with your website? Okay. That's what I get all day long. And it's got to be, I think the good news is you guys going up against people that are just out there doing that has got to be a breath of fresh air.
I hope so. And in today's like advent of AI technology, there's a lot more content. And that's why I think really investing in getting your right content so it stands out and it feels authentic and different is so important. Look, I'm not harping poorly on AI because it has so many benefits for our industry to making tasks simpler, more efficient, research, like there's so many benefits. But when it comes to talking to a person, people want to talk to people. So like let's make sure your person is talking to a person in languages that like really make sense and resonate, and we're not wasting each other's time with a lot of noise. And so I think that's really, really important. LinkedIn got exhausting for like earlier this year. It was just a lot of content that was like irrelevant for a lot of people because it was all of this chatter and AI, and everyone was becoming a thought leader on LinkedIn at the same time.
Right.
I I think it's settled down a little bit now, but really the messages that I'm reading are the ones that like you can tell a human wrote it. And it feels very personable and like to the point, less is more, like let's just cut to the chase.
Well, I think you'll if you talk to me longer and we had offline conversations, you'd probably find that I'm a little bit of an AI antagonist. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's the right word. It's like, yeah, I mean, I see it. I know that people can use it to help, but just because it's on a computer and something's doing something for you doesn't mean it's AI in the first place. We've
Right.
had AI for 30 years. If it's just a computer thing doing things for you, it's called software. Um, but if they slap the word AI on it, somehow it's new and different, and people should pay attention. So I'm in my team loves it when I start getting on my rants about AI. So
Brad, I need to connect you with another client of ours, Matt Raymond, and he has a business development call center operation, and he's termed AI for his business as actual individuals answering the phone.
I love it.
Cool. So that is, I think, trademarked now as AI actual individuals. But
That's funny. That's awesome. Well, so tell me, I'm sure you deal with this all the time. Talk about mistakes.
Hmm.
What are some of the most common mistakes, or maybe the biggest mistakes that you've seen working with clients? And not that you have to call out any specific client, of course, I would never ask you to do that. But if you've maybe got some use case scenarios where, hey, somebody did this, and also this is how you helped them, I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can probably think of like three or four big mistakes. And the first one is probably just having lack of consistency. There's so many great ideas these days, like, let's start a LinkedIn newsletter, let's do a podcast, let's try radio ads, like all these shiny objects. And oftentimes you might have a really motivated CEO who reads an article and is like, why aren't we doing this? And then the whole marketing team, the whole communications, or the whole business kind of has to go rally around that shiny object. And you do it maybe for a couple weeks, and then the CEO lose interest or the kind of company lose interest. And all of a sudden you just wasted a lot of time and resources in chasing this shiny object, and
Hmm.
it didn't really move the needle. And it's not because that shiny object wasn't good, it's because you weren't being consistent with it. And I think
Right.
that's the best thing that the companies that I see succeed the most is when you're playing the long game with public relations, with communications, as you commit to it and you do it well. And I really think that the companies do less tactics. If you do less tactics, but you do fewer tactics better, that's going to serve you so much longer in the long run. So that lack of consistency, I think, is a problem because it's so easy to get sidetracked and try something new. But I think if you stick to what's working and just continually do it well and track it month over month over month, you'll have much better kind of long-term results. I would, if you're committing to something, I would say minimum commit to it is 6 months,
Right.
maybe 3 months on some things, but continuously analyze the data and don't look at it just month over month, really look at it over like quarter over quarter type thing.
Can I pause you right there too? And I'll let you share the other two here in a second. I just had to say this. So like you remember, again, I'm dating myself, but like when websites first started coming out, it was all about having a blog, right? So everybody had a blog. Everybody and their brother had a blog. And even now, right, you look at a lot of websites, and there's a link at the top that says blog, and you click on it. And we're here in 2024, right? You click on the blog and it says last article 2016. That would be maybe an example of somebody who thought that was a good idea,
Right.
but didn't have the legs or the consistency to keep it going, right? So,
Mhm. Agreed. And the same as like with social media platforms, like, Threads kind of had a hot moment last year. I think it's still growing, but like if you were committing to Threads, like you should go all in on it. You can't just like dabble a little bit and then someone finds you and it's like, are they still in business? Like last time they posted was a year, 2, 3 years ago. It just makes you question a little bit. So that's a great example. The second one probably is just ignoring your audience. And again, that kind of speaks to what we were talking about earlier, but um, as a founder or business leader, you might be harping on something, but if it's not resonating with your audience, if they're not understanding it or clicking or engaging, like it's just making you're kind of talking to yourself. And so I think it's really, really important to look at the metrics, look at the data, ask for feedback, and really center your messaging on the audience. Right now, there's this advent of the editorial newsletter. I'm actually writing an article on it right now, but newsletters are kind of getting a breath of fresh air in them, where more and more people are shifting to this editorial style newsletter, which is more information focused versus sell focused.
hmm.
And I'm really excited about that because I think you're going to find some newsletters. You're mentioning hundreds of emails a day, probably a quarter of those are newsletters of some format. Um, as a person like Brad, you probably read a couple newsletters and you look for them in your inbox. And Google's smart enough now, or whatever mailbox, they probably even flag them for you. Hey, this newsletter is here. We know you read it. I think that's fantastic. And I think what people are going to start doing is maybe subscribe for a ton of newsletters, but you're really just reading the ones that you care about. And those are probably these editorial-based newsletters where you're gaining information from it and not being sold to. So pay attention to your audience, speak to them. Don't just speak about yourself. As a business owner, you're told, oh, go promote your business, like brag on yourself, stop being so humble. I think that's good advice, but it needs like a place for it. Like you can't always just be pushing out emails of, we did such great work this week. Look at all these results. Yay, us. You got to shift to what does your audience actually want to hear about? And that's probably how you're solving problems for them, like the solution, the title for your podcast, not necessarily why you're so great. So, and then the third one is probably too much or too little focus on selling. So I talk about the editorial newsletter. That's great. But if you're not converting, then it's a problem. And you're just kind of putting free information out there for the public. But if all you're doing is promoting, and then you're probably going to lose your audience because they are looking for more than just being sold to. So really find that balance of when's the right time to shift to like that marketing role, and how do you balance it out with the public reputation, the storytelling, the communications. And I really think that rule of three, so having three touch points before you try to sell, is a really good rule of thumb for me.
That's a great suggestion, and I love and I love those tips in terms of the common mistakes that people make. Because quite frankly, I'm guilty as charged as well. I mean, I'm just as likely as anybody to go, "Ooh, I heard about this. We haven't tried that. Let's go do that."
Yeah.
Um, and we even did a billboard once, and I was resistant for like, I mean, I don't know. It took about a year and a half for somebody to convince me that we ought to do one because I had done one in another company like 10 years ago, and I'm like, they're pretty expensive. I mean, if you're a plastic surgeon and you're charging, $15,000 for a sale, okay, I mean, maybe that'll work, but you've got to have a lot of them. And so anyways, I go off on another one of my topics, but the whole point is, yeah, if somebody walks up to you and says, you ought to do a billboard, it's worked for me, and you're like, oh, let's go do a billboard, that sort of knee-jerk shiny object syndrome, I'm guilty as just as anybody else, and it's so tempting, right? It's like, oh gosh, what have I been missing out on? So
Yeah,
uh,
right?
how did I not know that that was a big thing? um so let me ask you a little bit about like rebranding, because even in your company, right, you've been on this 3-year journey, growing it, and I'm sure you've learned some things, and we all make mistakes, and I'm sure you've made your own. Um, Even being in the business, right, you learn from those things that you try and don't work. So yeah, I guess you wouldn't even call them a mistake. They're just learning opportunities. But at what point? So tell me a little bit about that, and then also at what point, if you've gone down a path and you've decided that maybe it's not the right path anymore, what point do you rebrand, and how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, lots to unpack there.
Yeah.
So I'll start with they are mistakes. And I think owning your mistakes is really important, and realizing, hey, that was a mistake. Now I'm going to learn from it is okay. But I think it's okay to call a mistake and kind of take that ownership over it, and then not try to find fault other places. So, one, I believe in mistakes, and I believe in owning them and sharing them, and being okay with recognizing when a mistake was made. And we certainly have made mistakes in 3 years of scaling very quickly. Um, but with kind of regards to like how we've managed our growth and embrace those mistakes and learn to pivot as well, I think it's always focused on like what are we trying to achieve? And part of the work we do is help companies define mission and vision statements. Mission statement is kind of like, what are you doing? What's your day-to-day work that you do? What's the mission of your company? What products do you deliver? What service do you deliver? The vision is more of that lofty goal of, am I working towards a place that I feel good about, that my values are intact, that I wake up each morning and feel motivated to what I'm doing. And for me, the mission guides the week to week, the decisions we're making. Is this getting us closer to doing, are we serving our clients well? And are they happy with our services? Are they repeat customers? Are they long customers? And that's really mission focused. Is the mission delivering value for our clients? The vision, I think, is the strategic mindset that helps you embrace mistakes and turn them into opportunities. For our company, ASC, our vision is actually making the working world more kind. It has nothing to do with PR or communications, and it has a lot more to do with how we operate as a team and how we treat our clients and customers and partners, which is really coming at it from a place of recognizing the value that we each bring to the table, respecting each other's opinions, helping companies grow, being okay with pivoting if needed. So maybe we did something and advised a client to do X and it didn't impact their business. How do we make it right for them? And that's, I think, something that has helped us really retain those clients, even if the paperwork doesn't necessarily say or guarantee that we're going to get them X number of media placements. If the client's not happy and they feel less satisfied, I believe in our vision of making the working world more kind, we'll have a conversation about it and figure out how to make it right and try to fix it in that moment versus looking at the paperwork and saying, well, that was your fault because you didn't give us XYZ or blaming a team member.
Right.
So as we've grown, keeping that vision statement really at the back of our mind for every decision or how we interact has been really, really helpful for me as a leader. And that has also kind of helped me think through a possible rebrand for our own company. So you asked about when should a company know it's time to rebrand? And I'll give you an example with our own company. I think we're approaching a point where it's helpful to have a rebrand. I started Stallman Communications when it was me, myself, and I, and no intention of ever hiring a single person. So that was back in 2021. And I thought I wanted to work for myself, have independence, and partner with businesses and organizations and help them solve things through project-based work. Well, quickly I realized that what I was offering to them was in high demand. They needed someone nimble to come into their organization, help fix things, help get the right communication strategy in place. And along the way, I was picking up more and more work, but also having the opportunity to meet other women like me that were perhaps leaving, this is 2021, so leaving big corporate jobs because of where the state of the world was at that time
Right.
and scaling back their own careers, but still looking at opportunities to work. And I started partnering with other women and individuals and taking on larger projects. So slowly, Stallman Communications became much more than one person. And in 2022, we hired our first person full time. And since then, we've grown to 12 full time people. And the issue we're at now is I don't know everything. We're a team of 12 fantastic, incredible women. We are all women at this point, but full time. And when a client wants to hire Stallman Communications, I may not be the best person to help them solve their problem. One of my colleagues might be the better person. And that's why we often go by ASC because it kind of reduces my name a little bit.
Right.
And I'm really excited to start elevating more of our team members and their expertise because at the end of the day, it's not just me, it is this full team. And Stallman Communications doesn't actually reflect the incredible wealth of experience my colleagues bring to the table. So we're moving towards a rebrand in 2025, which is really exciting for me. And I think for us, it just felt like the right time because the products and the service we were delivering didn't match the brand name. When one of my colleagues is leading everything and doing fantastic work, they don't need to say I work for Stallman Communications. They can really, it should be a different name at this point.
Right. I mean, first off, congratulations on the growth. I mean, because just one, I guess, especially even, surviving 3 years. I mean, a lot of companies, it's hard just to survive, 1, 2 years. So sounds like you're doing a great job. And I can appreciate too the thought behind the rebrand. I've got to think that's got to be a scary thing though. I mean, especially if I mean, even our business, even, in your business or in the clients that you're working with, they've invested a lot of time and energy and money, hopefully building up a brand, right? And then to just change it, has got to be just, I mean, to me, that would feel overwhelmingly scary. So how do you help people get beyond the fear of like, oh my God, I'm going to rebrand and then I'm going to lose all my clients. You know,
Right.
how do you
It's
get beyond that?
scary. Well, we've been helping another organization through the rebrand process, and it still has not been announced. And I believe that process started in like February, March of this year. So it takes time and it takes by like getting all the information, understanding what's the value of a rebrand. What is this rebrand going to do? Is now the right time? What can we offer with it? And then once you kind of make that decision, defining the right name takes time. It's a whole process of coming up what's the right verbal identity and visual identity. So it's not just the spoken word or the written word, it's how does the brand look and what emotions does it convey? And then once you kind of even get that, it's like, okay, let's message test it internally. Let's bring a small group of people in, talk about it, you know, throw the terrible scenarios at it, see how you pivot from it. So rebrand should not happen quickly at all. And you should not go into it lightly either. I would say a good rebrand probably minimum takes about 6 months from ideation to full execution of it, and sometimes longer, depending on what goes into it. So I think don't be scared of it. And that the way to get ahead of that fear is by investing the time to really thinking about it. And it doesn't mean you need to like be spending all your resources on it, like sleep on it. I truly, truly believe in just sleeping on ideas and thoughts and letting it breathe for a couple weeks in your head. You get so much, you feel better about it. And if you're kind of doing those knee-jerk reactions, you'll probably end up with a brand you don't really like. And so just sleeping on it, taking the time, talking about it with others, and really gathering all that information. And then when the time is right, unveiling it in a very intentional way. So you start with employees, then you expand it to loyal customers, maybe board members, and then it kind of like broaden the ecosystem. So by the time you're reaching your customers on the external side or prospective customers, you have built in all these brand ambassadors that can also tell the story of why the rebrand happened. And they're basically telling it in your own words because you've done all that hard work of training them on the new message.
That's awesome. I love you. I love especially the whole. I mean, just the idea of sleeping on it. Sometimes easier said than done, right? Because like I'm one of those guys that every once in a while, like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, I'm waking up because I can't sleep on it. Right? My head is spinning, and it's like, oh God, I got what about this? And what about this? So uh,
Do you use the like email scheduling tool? I do that all the time. Like I might be fired up on something. I write the email. I'm like, I know I need to just walk away and schedule this email for like 10 a.m. And it's 10 a.m. It's not 8 a.m. because you have to give yourself time to cancel the email if
right.
needed.
I've sent myself emails to say, think about this, when you're not, walking in your sleep at 2 in the morning. Um, so let me ask you this. This is because one of the things that you said kind of triggered a thought in my head, like in our company. So, we're QuickBooks, right? We're QuickBooks bookkeeping, accounting, consulting, training, all that stuff related to QuickBooks. And one of the ways that we've grown our company over time is through acquisition, right? We've acquired a bookkeeping practice, or we've, acquired clients from another bookkeeping company and things like that. And so that's almost like a rebrand, right? Like if you've got a client that's working with a company, right, that gets sold to another company like ours, for example, to them, I've got to imagine that kind of feels like a rebrand. They're working with this new company now. Have you ever helped clients with that type of scenario where they're in that acquisition mode and they're constantly having to deal with clients who've never met them and their current brand?
Right. Oh my gosh, all the time. And acquisitions are really exciting. It's great for business. Like acquisitions are a good thing. And it's part of growth. It's just part of business operations that happens. But we do work with companies, and sometimes it's like, hey, the paperwork's getting signed tomorrow. Maybe we should have brought you in sooner to talk about this. And we're like, probably, but I understand how that world works. Like sometimes you don't have the time or the luxury to bring in external people because the deal might fall apart. Um, and so whether we have 24 hours or, probably 4 to 6 weeks is at the high end of what type of time frame we would have with a company going through a deal process. Um, I think the most important thing is to first really work on the initial press release that's announcing that acquisition. And we call that in our world the owned media. It might be a press release, it might be a blog post, whatever externally is going out to the world to introduce this new alignment of companies. It's really, really important that the source organization is providing as much information as possible because you want to define the narrative of why this is happening before other customers start defining it for you. Oh, they weren't doing well and they need to do a fire sale. Oh, they're shifting focus and they're no longer do this. Oh, like so and so is leaving the company and they're going to lose this great resource. Those are all those threats out there that could define your brand before you even have that first kind of like customer interaction. So really investing into, and if you're going through a period of business change, of creating your own message that you fully control and you get that out there in the world and you're the source, that is the singular most important thing a brand can do when going through changes. And then beyond that, I think it's, really finding that alignment. Of how your values match with the possible new company you're aligning with. Make it more people-centric versus sales-centric. I think during any period of change, people want to know, hey, is this staying the same? Am I still going to work with the same people? Can I still trust them with my business? Selling them your services will come in time, but building that trust in that initial change period is really important.
Well, and I appreciate you're reinforcing the internal company people side of things, which again, sometimes we overlook when we think marketing. So again, appreciate you continuing to hammer that home because it needs to be hammered home. And yeah, especially, I mean, the scariest thing in an acquisition is the people side, right? Because people are nervous. Am I going to keep my job?
Mhm.
Am I going to be replaced? All those types of fears and concerns are legitimate, right?
Mhm.
Um, so addressing that is super, super important. So thanks for bringing that up. Well, we're almost out of time. I did have
Wow.
one more big picture question that I wanted to ask you about because again, you're in the industry. You're working with companies, digital marketing, branding, um, the corporate communication, PR, all that stuff, kind of stuff. And so, what are some of the trends that you're seeing that not so much in the shiny object syndrome, but just like what are the types of things that you're suggesting that to folks pay attention to because it's gonna be bigger and bigger over the coming years that we don't want to be left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably go through three or four trends here. So the first being that purpose-driven storytelling, and that usually comes from a person. So person speaking to person. Figure out not every company thinks they need a spokesperson. I think every company needs a spokesperson. If you're a company selling services or products, but you can't identify that company or company or organization with any person, you're limited in how you can engage your audience. And so I think having a person-led, purpose-driven storytelling approach is really, really important, especially on like a LinkedIn platform. Right now, the LinkedIn algorithm is favoring people over companies. And that means there's this whole opportunity for CEOs and founders to be out there telling the story on behalf of their company. And that's the content that's getting the most traction. So really think about who is your organizational spokesperson and how are they equipped to tell your brand story. So driving in that storytelling and equipping them with the tools and data points and examples and references, customer success stories to really help be that messenger. The second is probably this crazy world of like digital and real life experiences. So rewind 4 years ago, we were pretty much an all digital society for a period of a year. Now, then we kind of got really back into events and people did events really well and everyone was going back to them. I think now we're in this hybrid world where we're pretty agnostic to is it digital because there's some really high quality digital events that you can attend and it feels very real. Podcasts have boomed, you feel like you're in a conversation. There's quality, impressive digital experiences. And then there's also in real life experiences, whether you're walking into a store, attending a conference, whatever it might be. And I think as a society, the best brands are the ones that figure out how to blend the digital and the in real life. So how do you have a digital experience and then have the in real life experience and they feel very harmonious together? And so really blending those two worlds so you don't just have like, that's our webinar side of the business and that's our in real life side of the business. You want them to feel the same. Um, and then the third is probably just be shorter. People really like short form content, whether it's a quick video, a quick newsletter, really thinking about how to have more touch points with people with less content. So figuring out how to touch them a couple times. And if you do that well, they'll stay for the long form. Like this podcast is fantastic, but someone's probably not going to commit to like 45 minutes of their day to listen to the podcast unless they've had a taste of this kind of what's going to come in other ways. So think
Right.
about those short form content to hook people to convert them to long term, long form users.
That's fantastic. I call that the short attention span, right? It's like my kids, you know, they've got yeah, 5 seconds, and I guess the adults are the same right now, right? Everybody's on their phone, 5 seconds, or you've lost me. So very, very good stuff,
4-year-old that loves YouTube. Like, how did that happen?
right? Well,
I just want YouTube videos.
well, I liked what you said about every business needs a spokesperson, but also want to ask you a related question on that. So again, I mean, I've worked with lots of companies. You've worked with lots of companies, and I think the logical, at least what my brain says, is the logical best fit for that is oftentimes the owner, maybe the CEO. But I've also seen owners do their own TV commercials, and sometimes it's pretty bad. So, at what point do you say, hey, maybe the owner isn't the right person because they don't really have that type of dynamic personality or engaging personality? They're an engineer at heart, but here they are trying to promote and sell a business and they're like awful at it.
Yeah, no, and that's, well, one, we can help. Like we can do some training to help make them maybe not awful, but better. But you also have, founders that it's just not, they want to be behind the scenes and they might realize the need for it, but they're not going to be in that role. And that's when you find a chief marketing officer who helps tell the story. I recently had the opportunity to work with a oral surgery center that did oral surgery. And their surgeons did not have time to be the spokespeople talking about their business. Rather, we told their business through the lens of a chief marketing officer who could tell why it's important to get to know your oral surgeon and what questions you should be asking and really help market the brand. So, yeah, sometimes it's not the CEO or the surgeon, it's the CMO. But sometimes you also don't even go at that C-suite level. And I absolutely love FedEx and UPS advertisements because it's never anyone in a suit. It is the person you're engaging with day in, day out that is selling FedEx and UPS services. And it's in the brown suit, the navy polo, and that's kind of who you're resonating with. And an example like that, if the average consumer is touching someone that's not the CEO, think about how your delivery man could be the spokesperson or the brand representative of the company. So it doesn't always have to be the CEO. They don't have to be the face of the company, but it should be someone that your consumer trusts.
That's awesome. Like I've said, yeah, perfect. I've seen those commercials where it's like I'm, fill in the blank, and they're interviewing 20 people that are on the front line in the warehouse and everything else, and I'm, whatever. I think that is exactly what you're talking about. So I appreciate that. Well, so Anna, this has been amazing. You are obviously an amazing expert at this stuff, and I really appreciate you coming on our show and sharing your perspectives and your insights. As I always do, if somebody wanted to learn more about you guys, engage you, talk to you, how do they best go about doing that?
Well, I would love that. Reach out. I answer every email, also probably between the hours like 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. occasionally. But my email is Anna, A-N-N-A, at Anna, A-N-N-A, comms, comms.com. Probably seeing why I think we need a rebrand right there. And then our website is annacomms.com. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on X. And again, always reachable by email. So thank you so much for having me, Brad. This is fantastic. And I love what you're doing with your podcast.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And so I guess in general, if somebody didn't get all that, it'll be in the show notes, but you can also just Google Anna Stallman Communications and probably find you, right?
Yes.
So thanks again for being on the show. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom here. And for everybody else, hope you enjoy the show today. There's more to come next week, so stay tuned and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
There is a Solution for That is produced by VARC Solutions. This episode was produced by Ashley White and Aaron Riley. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Watch the video version on youtube.com/there'sasolutionforthat or visit varcsolutions.com/podcast where you'll find our entire podcast archive, as well as show notes, links to solution providers, and complete transcripts of every episode. If you love the podcast, please leave a review with your comments.